You're ready to be premature all over again.
Wow, that's impressive.
Quick
bro.
reset. Quick reset.
Yeah, that's right. Licking gin balls.
It's just going to be a vicious cycle.
Who knew the job was pro bono?
I was so high that I shit myself at some point.
Okay, get still here. Somebody, everybody mute. Goddamn, you're killing me.
My SEAL Team 6 went to SEAL Team 12.
There's nothing wrong with punching above your weight.
To play with you.
better. Well,
I don't know what's worse. You're a ginger or you've been vaccinated.
You sit around and drink and solve the world's problems, right?
Hey, let's go ahead and unwrap this present
So,
and let the debate begin.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. It is another episode of A Spirited Debate. As we wind down the year and we fast approach Christmas, we got a good one for you today. Obviously, before we jump in, we will do as we always do. Gentlemen, how is everybody doing?
All I want to do is zoom,
we're done.
zoom.
No.
And a poom poom.
Look,
Or just shake your rump.
no. The last time we did this, Haas came out of the gate with his boom shakalaka. I was kind of hoping for a repeat.
Which
but
was amazing.
It
Listening
was.
back to that.
I'm,
There's like this quiet, and then he's, I'll start a boom shakalaka.
I'm
exactly.
bringing 90s hip hop lyrics every week.
Is that what you're doing? That's
So
your
that
thing.
you
Not
can
like
actually
your shtick?
understand. Yeah, so you can actually understand what the fuck they were saying and how
Gotcha.
ridiculous it was.
I appreciate that.
Nice.
I mean, what the fuck is a poom poom? Come on, anybody?
Well,
Yeah, no,
we
I don't
thought
know.
you would
I don't
tell
know.
us.
Yeah.
No?
Nah, I
We
got
lean on
nothing.
your expertise for
All
that
right.
genre.
Then stick to margaritas. It's what you know. Yes. So we are back. We got a guest on the show. We invited somebody in to talk about another topic. This topic is going to be an interesting one. It's one that we have touched on before, but now we're kind of drilling down into something slightly more specific. But before we jump into that, let's go ahead and introduce our guest, get our drinks out of the way, and then we'll jump into our topic. So our guest today is none other than the Doc, somebody that we have known for quite some time, 30 years plus, went to school with him, and we thought it would be a nice change of pace to invite him in and let him discuss our topic. So Doc, how are you doing today, brother?
Doing great. It's funny that we were just talking that the last time we saw you guys in person was at the Tool concert a few years back. That was a great show, great time had by all. So good to see everybody again.
And look at how much the landscape has changed since then in the world. It has changed drastically. Yeah. So, thank you for being here. Glad that you were able to join us and talk about this very specific topic. What are you drinking today?
So I am not quite as adventurous as you guys are. So today I've got a Peerless Bourbon old fashioned with, the bitters are pecan, magnolia, and habanero bitters.
Oh, shit.
Very nice.
That's pretty damn nice.
I remember
See,
you got
that
that, like,
sounds pretty adventurous.
He was about to say,
Well,
he
you
said
got
he's
that-
not adventurous. Shit.
you got that,
That
like
sounds-
collector's set of bitters, if I remember right.
Yeah, the missus bought me I think it's a 6-pack of artisan bitters from a company called Crude Bitters.
Yeah.
So it's not agnostic then.
No.
No.
No,
no.
I think I have like it's like a pineapple one, maybe. I think I saw it in your set when you sent the picture out.
And what's the name again?
Crude Bitters.
Crude.
And
bitters.
they're
Okay.
what kind? Because obviously orange bitters for an old fashioned. This is, you said pecan?
Yeah, this is pecan, magnolia, and habanero.
Oh,
But
so
the
a
set
little
has some others like a salt and smoke. They've got a like an oak and oaky one. They've got a kind of a sweet one that's orange and fig based.
They're based there out of Raleigh. Huh?
That's what I was going to ask. Are they a local?
Yeah, they're local here to Raleigh.
Okay.
So
Very
the
nice.
missus works in the local liquor and wine industry. So always getting wonderful
Nice.
microbrews. Great. Oh, there you go.
Nice.
Okay.
Yeah,
What do you
I
have
knew
there?
it.
Do you have the
Orange and fig and the toasted coconut and burnt pineapple.
yeah, the orange and fig is a great regular drinking one, and the rest are good for special occasions. So
Hells yeah.
So you literally thought you'd spice it up with a little pecan, magnolia, and habanero in your old fashioned. Very nice.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I appreciate you coming to the table with that. You say you're not adventurous, but I would defy that that's the case with something like that. We all just go with, I'm sorry, what kind of bitters is it, Haas? What do we do?
Mhm.
Agnostra?
Agnostra.
Agnostra bitters.
Mhm.
Just a normal orange.
Not Angostura, because that's
No.
a totally different brand.
That's right.
That's right.
All right. So let's go ahead and continue the carousel. Let's move around the room. Haas, since you chimed in, what are you drinking today?
I am drinking something called, well, I got to find the name of it again. It is called a Sunset by the Bay. I have been looking for, as you are well aware, I've been looking for this Don Papa rum here for a while now. I finally found some, bought a few bottles, and I don't know where I was looking. Maybe like little things hanging from the side like they do. And it recommended doing this. It's essentially a tequila sunrise, but with rum. So it's, 100 milliliters of orange juice. Of course, I doubled everything. 30 milliliters of pineapple, 10 milliliters of grenadine, and then 45 milliliters of rum. Like I said, I just doubled everything. And I'm trying to get into tequilas. I still need Max help to further better my palate in the tequila field. But as far as this goes, this is definitely going in the rotation for sure.
I'm surprised you're not just drinking the rum straight. 9 fingers on the rocks.
The first night I got the bottle, I had 2 or 3, just like that.
There you go. All right. So a tequila sunrise, just you subbed out the rum, right? Or the
It's
tequila
called
for rum.
Sunset by the Bay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very nice. All right, Mac, let's jump to you as our chief margarita officer. What are you doing today?
I'm not doing anything with tequila or margaritas. I was kind of reading over an article that Haas sent out. It was either earlier this week or last week, the 20 best sex toys. And I already know
that's a pivot I didn't see coming.
We're talking about drinks, right? Drinks.
There was
I'm sorry, what?
There was a full body sex swing. So I went with a Singapore sling.
Nice.
Which,
Transition.
see how I tied it all in?
You're the man.
You have to tell the story and paint a picture.
Is that because you have 2 U-bolts anchored in the bonus room in your house from the ceiling?
Yes.
Just checking.
Those have been taken down. Don't worry.
Oh, gotcha.
By swinging on the sex.
That's right.
COVID hasn't been kind to me. I'm a couple extra pounds.
Well, apparently your rafters either.
So
back to the drink. All right.
I don't even know what's in it now.
So you're Singapore
moving
swinger.
right along. It's a Singapore sling, so it is a gin-based drink. So it typically calls for the gin, fresh lime juice, cherry liqueur, grenadine, and Angostura bitters. Being the fantastic bartender that I am, I had a pre-made mix for Singapore sling. So I added that to an ounce of the aviation gin to mix it up, and then you just shake it up.
Of course you did.
Whatever rocks. What's that?
I said, of course you did.
We don't all have Mrs. Grinch living there to bartend for us. So I get it.
God,
makes sense.
Damn, that's good.
Now, if you'd have made it from
scratch, that's actually pretty good.
If you'd have made it from scratch, would it be good?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay. You trust enough in yourself.
I may have to make another one. I don't have cherry liqueur.
Back to the mix.
Well, it was just a small bottle of mix, so
that
was all I had.
So one and done. Boring. All right.
Just like me.
I appreciate that. All right, Grinch, we're going to move to you. What are you drinking today?
Got it. I'm drinking an Alabama Slammer.
Grinchman Freud. I apologize. Yes. I missed your name, Grinchman.
You really are leaning into the redneck thing.
Yes. Emphasis on the slam.
Sweet Home Alabama.
Well, Southern Comfort. Actually, you cannot buy slow gin around here. So I had to substitute grappa. You can go with like a plum brandy, but they didn't have that either. So grappa is not my number one choice, but this was a pretty good one. Amaretto and orange juice, and you garnish with a wherever it is.
Whatever.
There's a cherry in there somewhere. It's at the bottom. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Alabama Slammer.
So you can't get slow gin in North Carolina, huh? Another fucked up thing about your state.
Of the 4 ABC stores around us, none of them have it.
Wow.
Yeah. It's kind of an old school thing anyway, but yeah. In Southern Comfort's not my go-to. It's actually in the liqueur area.
Right. Yeah. Yep.
Yes. Yeah. And I just discovered recently that Monkey 47 gin I like, they actually make a slow gin.
Okay.
So I've actually ordered
that you can get
in
Austria.
Well,
All
I'm
right.
gonna suppose you or anything off the interwebs.
Alabama slammer.
Little anal bama slammer. Got it.
Mhm.
I guess I will go ahead and finish out the rotation. So, as usual, I decided I'm going to do a themed drink because that's what I do. So, I am doing what's called a generalized anxiety disorder. And it is obviously gin based. I went with the Breckenridge gin. And so I am doing, it is a generalized anxiety disorder. It is gin. It's basically a gin and tonic, gin, tonic water, lime juice, and then a splash of grapefruit juice, which I've never seen before in a gin and tonic, but I figured I'd give it a try. So that's what I'm doing.
And what's the verdict?
Well, it looks pleasant.
I'm not a grapefruit fan, as we learned from the Paloma that I think Mac brought to the table. But it's actually not bad because it's only a splash, and I think I went very light-handed on the grapefruit juice. But yeah, that's what I'm doing. So it's basically a gin and tonic, and it's called generalized anxiety disorder. So that's what I'm doing.
Which gin are you using?
It's called Breckenridge. It's Breckenridge gin.
Breckenridge. Okay.
Yeah,
home squeezed grapefruit juice, of course.
Yes, and a home squeezed lime juice too.
Of course. Okay.
Yeah, I'm not buying fucking limes or fucking lime juice. I'm just get lime, squeeze it, and boom, there you go. So, are you hiding your face for a reason?
I'm ready to cheers this.
Oh, gotcha. Sorry. So, obviously, to you gentlemen, Doc, thank you for being here. Do another great episode.
Doc.
Cheers to everyone.
Glad to have you.
Cheers.
Cheers. Prost.
And let's go to work. All right. So we have everybody ready. We invited Doc into the studio so that he could step behind the curtain and see how this works and be a part of the conversation. This topic is one that, from my understanding, because it was brought to the table through Doc and the Grinch, was psychological help, but as it relates specifically to men's psychological help. Obviously, with COVID, Doc kind of set the tone early by saying, we all got together over 2 years ago in 2019 for a concert. The landscape from that time till now has changed drastically in the world, obviously, with the disease that we will not name running rampant, variant after variant. We are in a kind of weird situation, or have been for the last 2 years. And one of the things I think that comes out of that is an issue in terms of mental health. You're stuck in your house, you're stuck at home, maybe you're alone, maybe you're not. We talked about mental health in season 1, and that was a very impactful episode, and we thought we'd revisit it. But as I said, we would drill down and focus on men and men's health, especially now in this kind of I hate to say the word unprecedented time, but really for us it is. So that is the topic. Anybody that would love to jump in and take us in a specific direction, I would love to know thoughts, perspectives. So what are we thinking?
Well, I'll just tease out a little bit to see if Doc wants to open up with some comments. But yeah, like you said, we in season 1 we touched on this as it related. Well, it came on the heels, if I remember right, from the news that a friend of ours from high school had committed suicide.
Yes,
and so we discussed depression, mental health. I think there's a lot of overlapping topics from that, but this is a little different in that we're kind of discussing that, like in the professional workforce, and just maybe culturally, men aren't as open to discussing mental health. They kind of view it as a weakness. And short of like, I think there was an article, the article that we kind of kicked around, there was a question that was in that article that was like, hey, if you really had something going on, do you have somebody you could call? Like who could you kind of offload with to share that burden, to kind of talk through issues? Because in the workplace, and I know this was definitely true in the military, we had a huge stigma to overcome of like just being willing to acknowledge you were hurting. It was either perceived as a weakness that would put you at risk for progression. There was some concerns about clearances at one point before they started clarifying that. And you certainly wouldn't want to show it in front of subordinates, because now, like, how does that look? You're supposed to be the strong one mentoring and guiding them, yet, so you just hold it all in, and eventually it starts having consequences psychologically, physically, emotionally, and then that takes a toll into other areas of your life. And in that, just to some kind of concluding that thought, like we referred to, the brain's got bandwidth. That's constantly taking up bandwidth. It's ever present. And so you're not at full capacity in your other areas. And so now then it kind of spirals and snowballs, because you're not doing as well in work. And then you're just like, shit, what do I got to do? and
Right.
and we weren't raised in an era where it was necessarily like it's fine to say you're going to see someone for help.
Right.
You know,
And
that
how
like
you
that
deal
was
with
an
it.
admission of weakness as
Failure.
opposed to I recognize I need to do something.
Right.
So yeah, just kind of open it with that.
So with that opening, I'd like to shift to Doc for a second in terms of why you got brought to the table. And again, you can as little or as much as you want to talk about, but you know how this particularly pertains to you.
I'll give you a little bit of my backstory and keep it fairly quick because it's not as applicable to the overall topic. I want to get a little deeper in the topic. For me, I have suffered from cyclical depression most of my life since I was in my teenage years. It at times is absolutely debilitating. We grew up in a time when, and it's still to an extent is stigmatized, but we grew up in a time when it was not acceptable to talk about that. And so I was in my mid 30s and just off the top of my head, I think my third cycles last between 5 and 7 years, for me at least. And I was in my 30s before I actually sought real, honest to goodness help. And it took a long time to get established with good psychiatrists, good therapists. You know, not all doctors are great. You know, not all doctors are good at communicating. And so over time, you know, kind of keeping the story short, it came down to learning how to communicate because there's very specific terms. And so when you kind of start to get into that arena and you become more comfortable talking about it, I think Grinch brought up a point. Sometimes all you need to do is just say it out loud, especially when it comes to, and you have to be careful about these terms because I know a lot of the content providers don't like it, but when you're talking about suicide, suicidal thoughts, a lot of times that's not, oh, I want to run out in traffic. I want to go harm myself. I want to harm somebody else. A lot of times it's a feeling of, you know, if a black hole opened up immediately beside me and just sucked me out of existence, I really wouldn't be too opposed to that today. And so that's kind of the feelings that I've always dealt with. It's never been an immediate desire to harm myself, to end my life, things like that. But it's just that kind of loss of a desire and a will to live. And so, you know, kind of fast forwarding, we go to, you know, why is this so difficult for men to deal with? And kind of connecting that into, Grinch sent me an article about male loneliness. And it's a great article out of Psychology Today. It's called The High Cost of Men's Loneliness. And it brings up the point that men don't tend to have close friends. I discovered during another one of my episodes that a lot of people that I considered close friends at the time were not close friends. I started going through some marriage difficulties in my prior marriage. I was going through the depression cycle. And this set of gentlemen basically were like, nope, we're out. And so you have that kind of that inability to talk about it. You have that fear of abandonment, and then you kind of run that into just you basically end up with all of the stigmas, and then you end up being alone in the world. So how do you as a man, you know, admit that you need help and you know, and then go seek out help without it being considered a bad thing?
And then having the understanding that by seeking out help, you find the appropriate help. Like you said, not all psychologists or therapists or psychiatrists listen well or communicate the way you need them to in terms of, you know, certain aspects. And so it's a matter of understanding, am I getting the right help? I'm not, you know, yes, just talking to somebody sometimes is beneficial, but is it something that's helping me? And so I think that's another issue that men deal with is like, how do I know that I'm even getting the right help? You know, and is it going to be beneficial?
Well, and that tends to be the way men are anyway, which is, I want the quick solution. Why is this taking so long? Right. You know, on top of the complexity of learning the vernacular of the human brain, which we aren't necessarily taught. You don't, in your basic health classes, you don't learn, like, unless you take like psychology in college, you don't necessarily delve into like the DSM and things like that to start learning the intricacies of how to describe, because you're used to going to the doctor and it's like, well, on a scale of 1 to 10, how bad does your ankle hurt? And then they start moving it around to try to figure out what's wrong. You can't do that with the brain.
And I think we're on like,
it's a bit of give and take. And only when you get that mature dialogue and trust, do you start learning how to offer better information to in turn get better help.
In the DSM, we're on what, 5 or 6 now? So I mean, even that is shifting. 8, 9, 10,
something. I don't know.
But before we continue, there is one thing I wanted to say in terms of what both you and Doc have mentioned. Is there was a study also done, Psychology Today, by an individual named Ronald Levant, and he studied traditional American masculine roles, and he came up with what was considered the 8 basic principles to guide male behavior, and they were emotional restriction, which you have mentioned, both of you.
Yeah,
avoidance of femininity, focus on toughness and aggression, self-reliance, achievement, rationality, objectification of sex, and homophobia. And those were kind of the 8 principles that guided men, specifically American men, which I thought was interesting.
Wow.
That they made that
I'm
distinction.
failing at all those.
Well, and what they did is they came up with there's a term in the profession for men or groups of men who are unable to identify and speak about their feelings. It's called Alexithemia, which I had never heard of. It's called Alexithemia. It's a personality trait characterized by the subclinical inability to identify and describe the emotions experienced by oneself. The core characteristic is dysfunction in emotional awareness, social attachment, and interpersonal relation. High levels of alexithymia occur in approximately 10% of the population and can occur with a number of psychiatric conditions, as well as any neurodevelopmental disorders. Difficulty with recognizing and talking about emotions appears on a subclinical level in men who conform to Western cultural notions of masculinity. And I think that is the relevant piece right there. It's weird from a Western standpoint. That's how we've kind of pigeonholed ourselves.
I mean, how many of our fathers and grandfathers, uncles, were like this, where they were very stoic? You really never knew how they were feeling. I mean, they'd tell you how they were thinking maybe, but they never really talked about their feelings, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. I constantly come back to this comparison, which is veterans really only like talking to veterans because they understand how to contextualize. Because the average person, I've said this before, like when you say a mortar hit your camp or you saw death or whatever, the average person's like, they can't even conceive it really. And so it's really hard to relate to, as opposed to starting a conversation with somebody already 2-3 levels closer to where you are. And I'm gesturing up. I don't mean for it to be up, vertical. It's just
right
in relation, degrees removed, maybe. Sorry, dog is barking again.
So why are we that way as a male society? I mean, that would be obviously the biggest question, is where did this pattern arrive or derive from? And how did we get into this situation? And as Doc said, it's a matter of, most males don't have a very close knit group of friends that they feel comfortable talking to. I think this group notwithstanding, I think for the most part, that's probably true for males. I mean, Hosh, you and I have talked about this repeatedly. Like, my wife is constantly commenting, like, I don't know anybody that has a group of friends like you that stays in touch 30 plus years, and that relate on the level that we do. And I think that helps, but not everybody has that. And
most
so
don't, I think.
Yeah.
Most other guys I know don't, at least.
And
Well,
no, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say on that point, I was in the car driving my daughters home from school. They asked, "Hey, do we know anyone that's a veteran?" And I said, "Oh yeah, Mr. Grinch is." And I said, "You remember him? We went out to eat with him and Mrs. Grinch." And I sat there and I was like, "Oh God, that was 4 years ago." My 6-year-old was still in a toddler seat, and I'm like, why have we not even,
Yeah.
So,
yep.
So it seems like in today's day and age, despite how connected we are, and things like Zoom and stuff are great, but it seems like regular social interaction as a man is very difficult. There's always something more pressing. It's work travel. It's family things. You always, and maybe this is a bad way to think about it, but sometimes it feels like, if the wife, comes home and she wants to go out and see some friends on Sunday, immediately anything that I was doing is out the window. I don't even ask. Right. So there's a tendency, I think, to cede that social interaction to anything else that comes up. And you end up in a situation where, oh God, it was 4 years ago.
Yeah.
But do you think part of the issue, Doc, is that as men, where if it is emotionally related, we're very quick to dismiss it. So if something does come up, we don't go, oh no, we really need to focus on me. We're very quick to just go, no, okay, let's do something else, or let's not focus on it. Let's not spend time resolving my issue.
No, that's exactly it. That's exactly it. I mean, I know that, when I'm having a bad day or something like that, and the wife comes home, or the girls are having something going on with them, no matter what I'm doing at that time, I just sweep it aside, try to ignore it the best I can, and deal with the other immediate task at hand. And so it's, in a way you feel bad because you don't want to be selfish. And in a way, that you're not taking care of yourself doing that. But it just seems like the better option is to deal with and this may go to, maybe a men mentality thing. We tend to be more tactical.
Yeah, we're very task
Emergency
organized.
happens, we act, we do it, we take care of it. When we go, there's I don't remember who it was, an author and marriage lecturer that talks about shopping as men versus women, but men go in, shoot the deer, come back out. Women go shopping, they go all over the place. And I think as men, we tend to be very tactical. So, when you're dealing with mental health issues, those they tend to be long-term, they tend to be chronic, not easily resolvable. And so it's much easier to, and maybe it's part of the way we're designed, maybe it's part of the way our hormones and brain works, but it's much easier to push that aside temporarily, deal with the emergency at hand, and then move forward later. I'm not saying it's healthy. I'm just saying
how much is learned behavior, though? Because I kind of want to go back. I mean, if I think of my own father and I think of my grandfather, mom, like none of the male role models I had growing up were emotional, engaged speakers. That wasn't the role they played. And whether by choice or not, I don't know, but they weren't.
Well, and that tended to be the framework of the interaction, with fathers, which is, I'm going to kind of teach you some life lessons. So we're going to go fishing. We're going to go hunting. We're going to do work on the car. Like, it's going to be things that I can tease out some life lessons oriented, as opposed to what's on your mind, kind of stuff. And then, Doc, to your point, I think it's very easy for us it's a convenient avoidance as well, because we are task oriented. And I think about, there was a psychologist with one of the organizations I worked with, and he said that a common trait of those that were there, and these were high functioning people, was that they didn't do well in undefined time and space. So in other words, hey, you've got your daughter or son all day, just hang out. And it's one of those, you're like, just hang out. Well, what do we do? I have to come up with a thing that we're going to do that day. I can't just hang out. We're going to go to the park, or we're going to go to Six Flags, or I'm going to come up with an activity to guide how we're hanging out, because I can't just sit here in undefined space and just talk. What?
We do that week in and week out.
Well, I think that that gets into another important area, which is that comfort of conversation with a group like this, which is what we've always said was a strength. And I think, Doc, you touched on it earlier, which was, in moments like what you described, you learn who your acquaintances are and who your friends are.
Right.
And there is a difference. Because when it comes time to burden share, if you will, it's like, I'm busy. I'm not looking for baggage, as opposed to if one of us phoned up each other, it's like that just became the most important thing right now.
Well, but I think
and not only that, though.
He's talking. Shh. Go ahead.
I'm done now. Fuck, what was I talking about? No, I think one of the important things you bring up there too, though, is you have to have a comfort level. So there's people I know that live around me that you were absolutely right, would be acquaintances, and I would say friends, but maybe not necessarily somebody that I would go to unburden myself, right? Because there isn't a comfort level there yet, like we have, having known each other for as long as we have, right? To your point, yeah. I mean, pick up the phone. I could call any one of you, and feel very comfortable unburdening myself with anything I have to talk about. So and we've touched on it before. Finding that is paramount, I think, to keeping a mentally healthy lifestyle.
Well, what I was going to say is I think this group we have crossed the line from friends to family at this point. I mean, this long of knowing you guys. Yeah. I mean, we've segued, we're beyond friendship and it becomes family. And that's how I look at you. What I thought was interesting based on this topic was some of the stats I looked at was men are dying. The suicide rate in men is 3.5% higher than women. And there is a reported 6 million men affected by depression every single year. So, obviously you say, I think there's like 151 million men in the United States, 6 million's kind of a drop in a bucket, but obviously it's an issue. 62,000 alcohol related deaths every year compared to women who have 26,000. So more than double in terms of alcohol. And they are 3 times more likely to misuse drugs because of depression than women. So clearly women are better at asking for help, are better at identifying that there's an issue. And maybe it is. And what they're referring to is the issue of toxic masculinity. And one of the things I thought was interesting, and I want to ask you, Haas, now that you live abroad, because they do kind of cite westernized culture in men, right? Do men relate the same way over there to each other that they do here? Or is it something you even noticed?
So far, my experiences, interactions, unfortunately, have been somewhat limited due to COVID.
Right.
But the few male friends that I've made here, no sharing. I don't know. Maybe it's me because I'm an oversharer, and I think sometimes that puts people who wouldn't be at ease, maybe because, well, shit, if I'm willing to put that out there, there's nothing more worse they could say, right? I've not experienced that being an issue. I actually have 2 or 3 male friends here that when I meet up with, we can have very open and honest conversations about really anything. In fact, one of them had to fly back to England because his brother got jumped and beat up by a bunch of guys, and was like suffering from like brain dysfunction and failure and all this other kind. And he sat there when we met up one time at the pub and was like just bawling his eyes out, talking about all of the issues that he was feeling about all this. So far, no, that's not been my experience, but I do feel as though, based on the conversations I've had, it's kind of an outlier thing because most European men are also extremely very stoic, for all of the most obvious reasons you can think of. I mean, this part of the world has been through a lot in less than 100 years.
It's that machismo, kind of that machismo of, I'm a man, I'm supposed to be the stoic one who carries the burden silently. And we know there are exceptions to everything. Obviously, that's a broad generalization, but that is sort of the societal norm that we've described and experienced, and even in our own lives. Even going through divorce, like with my dad and my mother, like I don't recall him ever just spilling his emotions of how it affected him. I still to this day don't know that I really know, nor do I know if it'll ever come up,
Well, I can tell you as one of the only group aside from obviously Doc who have been through a divorce, it's a painful process, and they relate it to death. They said the only thing is because you suffer it as a loss. The only difference is the person's still walking around, right? So they still there. So you don't get to mourn that loss in the same way you would if somebody passes and you say goodbye and stuff like that. So I can tell you divorce is painful.
And you typically still have to interact with them, especially when there's children involved. So that
Right.
You don't get to just kind of, like you said, mourn and move on.
Right. So,
oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say one thing I wanted to kind of ask. We've talked about, the kind of societal focus of men being kind of that stoic person. Do any of you think, and I mean, obviously I've got a daughter, I know most of us do, but do any of you think that is changing now with the younger generation? Or do you think we're seeing it be kind of a more open sharing relationship with younger men in the world today? I mean, like I say, it's hard for me to say because we don't really interact with a lot of younger kids and boys and stuff. So I don't know.
Yeah, like Chris was saying, I feel though like Austrians are very buttoned up people. Italian men, I mean, and Spanish men are the picture of machismo, right? Eastern Europeans, I mean, you couldn't talk about a more closed off, man than an Eastern European, I don't think. So I don't think over here, generally speaking, I don't see that they're really wholly different than us, except for the 2 or 3 guys I've met, but they're all either from England or France or the Netherlands.
Are they younger?
Yeah, okay. Our age or our age or a little bit younger.
Okay.
And I will say, I mean, obviously some things have changed, but we're not so far removed from remembering the 80s where it was a male dominated workforce and you got used up by your company. You either fought for a pension or retirement, or you got used up to by your company, and and people would have nervous breakdowns because they were just, that was how they define, like they how do I want to word this? Their character was defined by where they worked and their professional success. I will say, I think that is continuing to evolve as people, and myself certainly included in this. I'm like, I'm not going to let my job define me, like I'm going to find what makes me. Now it's a path, it's a learning path, it's not without its trips and, I thought I might, and this and that, but that's part of kind of self-discovery and awareness. But I certainly don't want to continue to be in a position where my job defines who and what I am.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. And my brother-in-law has a really good phrase for that. Your job should be what affords you to do the things that you love to do. Mm-hmm. Right. It should not be what, like you said, it shouldn't be what defines you. It should be what helps pay for you to do the things that define you.
You shouldn't live to work. You should work to live.
Yes. Yeah.
And it's interesting because we grew up in an era where there was, what you're talking about, Grinch, something occurred so rampantly that they actually came up with a term for it, and that was going postal.
Yeah.
And literally that was people just losing their shit.
Yeah. Getting to a breaking point.
And just doing sometimes awful shit,
and we knew it was also, and it, probably still is to a degree, common in Japan because there was such a social hierarchy connected to your profession and how your family was perceived and so forth. I mean, some of these other societies, like we probably will never know about, like Eastern Europe and that kind of thing, because they're just kind of closed off. They're not nearly as open about stuff like that. Like it's not like Russia's really going to give us a bunch of stats on people that are just, well, they embrace dark humor too, which is very cathartic. Perhaps I'd die. It's okay.
I would like to pivot though, because obviously coming to the table talking about this specific topic, looking at the last 2 years since COVID started in January, February of 2020, and kind of the way things have been going through lockdowns, multiple lockdowns, going through multiple variants, getting, your first sets of shots, looking at getting a booster. And like I said, everything that's occurred, companies going remote. So you no longer have the same social outlet that you did. And Doc, I know, at least from what my understanding was of what you had been doing, at least previously, it seemed like a very isolated job for yourself. Lots of travel in terms of what you were doing. And I don't know the job you've taken in the last year or whatever, what you're doing, you say you love, but I know during COVID, obviously the landscape changing, that's gotta be a massive thing for mental health across the board, but for men, obviously, with what we're talking about. So the landscape changing and the isolation, the article that you sent out talking about loneliness. I mean, where else is that more prevalent than in the last 2 years?
No,
Isolating
Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just saying, isolating ourselves from a masculine standpoint, now compounded with the fact that we are physically isolated.
No, I think that's a great point. Now, as far as my job, it's basically the same thing, different company. But I've been working remote since 2005. So I've not been in a proper office in, what is that, 15, 16 years now. So I'm kind of used to it. I'm used to the schedule, but it does. And it immediately when you start, it's very shocking. You start to realize a few things. The first being how much time you waste at the quote unquote water cooler. There's no such thing as an hour and a half lunch for me anymore. I eat lunch at my desk, drink my coffee at my desk. But at the same time, it opens up a freedom of, if I need to go get the tire on the car changed, or if I need to go run a quick errand, I just make sure I don't have a meeting during that period in time, duck out, come back. Nobody ever notices the difference as long as I've, accomplished my work. But at the same time, it starts to develop this, definitely a loneliness and isolation. I have to admit, I'm a little bit flustered with my job right now because I've literally met 2 other people that I work with in person in a year. Because of COVID, we no longer have quarterly or yearly kickoff and sales meetings. There's very limited travel up to our corporate office in New York. So it's not like I can just, and most companies that are, relatively financially healthy back in the day, prior to COVID would, hey, I'd like to come up to the corporate office and just hang out and meet everybody, go out to lunch, chit chat, do a little, brain dump, things like that. That would be fine. Now that's just not an option. And so it really becomes hard to find your fit and your place. Now, as somebody that works in sales, you realize I have a number that I'm attached to, and a number that needs to be sold. And that is an easy way to kind of keep track and keep your goal-oriented side going. But at the same time, you feel just so detached. Who do I call when I have a problem? Who do I ping when I have a question? And there's tools like Slack and obviously Zoom that help with that. But at the same time, you really do feel like you're on an island, and at times it's just not it's not enjoyable. And so I wonder, we talked, Grinch brought up the 80s and, going postal, people burning out, but I wonder if and this may be apocryphal, but it seemed to me like back in the more industrialized manufacturing era, you had a bunch of guys that worked on the factory floor. They all went out for beers. They all worked together 8 to 10 hours a day for 30 years. Then they all retired and all moved to Florida. It feels like there may have been more of even if it's not a direct emotional communication, a support system, less loneliness, less feeling like you're an island, like you're doing everything on your own, then
there's a point there you bring up that occurs to me. That it's more camaraderie, but it's also more camaraderie because the part you brought up is they all stayed in the same company working together.
They're all dealing with
for multiple decades. No one stays at a company more than 4 or 5 years anymore because you don't move. You only move laterally or at best maybe diagonally within a company. Now, if you want to really move up, you've got to move out and move on. And so I think that's a fair and valid point, that less camaraderie with coworkers because, okay, yeah, you leave a company, you made friends, maybe you keep in touch with LinkedIn, maybe.
Yep.
But probably not.
Not only that, though, you typically lived in the same area as those people you worked with.
Your whole life.
So, yeah, it wasn't that you were just going out and having a beer with them after work. Your kids were probably playing ball together. Daughters were probably doing dance, whatever it was. So, you saw them outside of work as well. And so it made it a little bit easier probably to kind of form that emotional attachment. Whereas,
Yeah.
now, I mean, Doc, as you know, and everybody knows, everything's so spread out. I mean, you could be working with people that aren't even in the same, time zone as you, obviously, and possibly even in different countries. So it's harder to kind of create that emotional bond when you're meeting folks that
right
way.
Yeah, it's hyper connected but not connected at a human level,
Right.
Like it's informationally connected but
Not emotionally.
Exactly what you were getting at there, Doc, is in what you touched on, Mac and Haas, is like you knew the families. You were aware if they were dealing with problems, so you'd ask, like, hey, how's your mother doing? I know she was in the hospital. Like, those were the types of things you knew and that humanized you and connected you. And we've said it on this podcast 100 times. We are social creatures. Social creatures need nurturing. And so nurturing from a care perspective, not from a how's work going? Like, fuck, I don't want to talk about work,
Right.
or, I mean, there are days I don't mind. It's fun, but like, that isn't what makes a person. What makes a person is their family, their friends, like like you said, go into a pub and noticing if somebody's not there. And you're like, hey, where is so-and-so? Like, you miss them, like you look forward to it. And I it was a few podcasts ago. I forget which one it was. I couldn't remember the name of the book. The name of the book was Outliers. The one where they did the study of the community in Italy. And we're like, why are these people living so long? They were so intimate with their pubs and their social networks that they were just happy. They were just happy. They didn't care if they were working a market or selling wine or grapes or fruit or working whatever. They looked forward to those evenings, spending time and laughing together. Like they were very family centric in the broader sense of, like, they felt like a community, as opposed to, like, nowadays. And this isn't a knock on anybody that I worked with, but 20 years in the Army, and there's like a handful of people, less than one handful, that I, like, if I were really in the mix, I feel like I could call, as opposed to this group, which I'm thankful we have, which is rare. It's very rare to still have connections like this from high school. And if you don't have either of those, if you're at this point in your life, the question is, how do you establish that? Because we've joked about you meet a person for the first time, and you're like, we're best friends now.
Did we just become best friends?
Yeah.
So I'm coming over tomorrow.
Well,
Right.
you say that, and it makes me immediately think of the what was that Man Park, the SNL skit that was in that article you sent, and they'll show them like Marvel. Like, I mean, finding those threads of commonality to where you've met your people, right?
Yeah.
So now you can all be best buddies.
I thought I'd hate working in a tap room, like dealing with people, and it's been kind of fun. I mean,
But
last night,
it's new right now.
It's the honeymoon period.
Not only that, but I think it's, you're dealing with people that have a common interest, right?
Beer.
They're
happy. They're
happy because they're drunk.
I think we need more pubs, is what I'm saying.
Are you asking us to open a pub? Is that what you're saying here?
I think that's exactly where we're going with this.
Okay. Look, I think it's interesting with this group of people specifically. Like, Doc has kind of shared a little bit of, like, the cyclical depression, going through a divorce, and been working remotely for 15 years, and the loneliness that comes with that. But I mean, if you look at the other individuals in this group, Haas, you moved overseas 2 years ago thinking the world was your oyster. You're going to do all this shit, and then COVID, boom, you're now isolated. You can do nothing. You can go nowhere. Grinch, you spent 20 years in the military, and then in the midst of COVID, you retire. What is your life now going to look like, right? Like, your job prospects kind of go in the toilet because of everything going on. Mac, yours obviously a little predates that, but you had been with
trying to make me depressed?
No, I'm saying, Mac. No, I'll get to my point. Relax, Mac. It kind of predating all of that a few years ago. You've been with a company, long-standing employee, and you pivoted. You made a choice, and you decided to go elsewhere. Really unsure, like, how's that going to work for me? You knew what you had here.
Took quite the sabbatical,
right?
Yes, and it was good.
and then we get to me, and my life's been phenomenal. So I don't get it. You guys are just.
Well, that's where we're going with this.
Yeah, that's where we're going.
You're all sad puppies, but not me,
suck.
fellas. I'm
That's
awesome.
right. Right. No, I'm saying, and we've talked about this multiple times. Like, not to beat a dead horse, being here week in and week out has been beneficial for us from a mental health standpoint, because we deal with shit all week. And then we can come here and kind of unburden ourselves, not always going, oh, my week was shit, blah, blah, but just talking about whatever we're talking about. And that has been a huge catharsis, I think, for all of us in the last year and a half.
Well,
because I mean, we didn't start this at the outset of COVID. We were 7 months in before we started this. So,
but I think another thing that, you know, I kind of originally was, I'm going to be honest. I ended up muting the chat was the morning memes. Right?
What? Motherfucker.
I said originally, but now it's like I look forward to them.
Matt. You cut me deep.
Now I look forward to them, right?
There's a part of my soul now
That's
that
a
just
hard
hurts
way to start the
internally.
day.
Take thy beak from out thy heart.
that's not in your heart, brother.
But that's the point I'm making, right? As soon as I did that, you know, a couple days went by,
Something's missing.
and you know, I would still check them throughout the day, but not, you know, necessarily right in the morning. But it was like, oh shit, my day's not right. I got to go see what Grinch sent out today.
And it's weird because he'll go like a week and do nothing, and then suddenly, boom, 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 you're getting spammed with a dozen.
He's got to build them up, right?
Right.
Yeah,
I got to build them up. I got to find the good ones. I'm not
Yeah.
going to just send shit. You know?
I get it. let's not stray too far from the path, obviously.
No.
But
I think
you know,
one question I would like to ask and maybe touch on, and Doc, I know you mentioned, you know, some doctors being better than others, and finding that right fit. You know, my mother-in-law was diagnosed years and years and years ago, obviously with bipolar and manic depression, and I you know, I feel like it's been a struggle trying to find the right medication, the right doctors, you know, for her to talk to. And I guess the way I kind of look at it and feel about it maybe is that there's still just a lot of unknown. I mean, it's the human brain, right? You know, it's not like, you know, if you break your arm, you can look at it and say, oh, shit, that's broken, right? I can see right there where it's broken. You know, when you start talking about the human brain, I think it's a lot harder to, you know, to diagnose where there's a problem, what that problem is, and how to fix it. So I guess the question is, do we think, I mean, obviously with everything, there's always room for improvement, but I feel like, you know, psychology, psychiatry, there's a long way to go to get to where we probably need to be to help diagnose those problems. And I guess, you know, my question, I guess, is, do you kind of agree with that, or
I agree.
do you think
wholeheartedly.
we're better? Okay.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. It starts off, and you know, I am blessed with a fairly high IQ, always did well in school, very intelligent, can read books, things like that, pick up, understand systems, understand computers. Not everybody has those same abilities, and I realize that. But I think it starts off, and I've learned a lot from my good doctors. We don't really have a language to describe what's wrong with you when you're dealing with mental health issues. It's almost like we're children. When I ask my 6-year-old, she says my tummy hurts. What the hell does that mean? Does that mean you've got indigestion? Does that mean you're having stomach cramps? Does that mean you've got diarrhea? You know, what does that mean, right? So in a lot of ways, when we're trying to describe mental health, we're like that 6-year-old. I don't feel well. I don't feel up for life today. I'm just down. I don't know what's up, right? And so we lack that language. Because what psychologists and psychiatrists depend on is things like, well, I'll give you an example of something I was dealing with recently. I had to recently come off the set of meds I was on because I was starting to have what we would call malaise. I was tired. I didn't feel like doing anything. I didn't have any motivation. So just like getting up and laying in bed was, I don't care. I don't, none of that. Versus now, once we've made some changes and gone through a few things, now I feel more activated. I have motivation. I have the desire to accomplish things. I have the desire to actually, get up and, accomplish. And so does the average person know the difference between being activated and feeling malaise? And, there's terms like that. And those are the terms that the doctors depend on so much to help diagnose. And it almost feels like splitting hair some days. Are you tired, or are you listless? Do you have energy? All those little things. It's very difficult to communicate.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. What's the difference between being tired and malaise, right? People, just a common person wouldn't know the difference.
Well, not only that, we talked about it, I think, before, right? There's clinical depression, and then there's just I don't feel that great today. I'm tired and I don't feel like doing anything, but tomorrow I'll probably be fine. And it's determining when that kind of just blah transitions over into something way more serious.
Yeah,
and being able to address and recognize that, because a lot of people don't, right? They just they think, oh well, that's just the way it is.
Well, and I don't know, Doc. I know I have suffered as well from depression in the past, and part of it for me is I didn't even realize I was depressed. Now you've been dealing with this a lot longer than I have, because I had my first bout about 5 or 6 years ago that lasted, I think it was like 6, 7, 8, 9 months, somewhere in there. But it was actually my wife who brought it to me and said, she goes, I think you're depressed. I think you need to get help, because you've been like this for a while now. It's like it happens to you in the humdrum of your daily routines in life, and you don't even realize it's happening to you.
Yeah, it's almost like I don't know. I'm trying to find a good metaphor or simile for it, but it's like a piece of machinery that's wearing down. You don't notice that it's straining a little harder, or if it's a motor drawing more current, or
the gears are slipping,
more effort to turn. It happens so slowly. It's not like you wake up one day and all of a sudden it's all gone to shit. It's I don't feel as energetic today as I did yesterday, and the next day I still don't have any energy, and the day after that, man, I'm really feeling rough. And then you could be 3 to 6 weeks into this before it even hits you that, man, I've now interrupted the flow of my life. I can't get up out of bed and take a conference call at 8 o'clock in the morning. It's got to be at 9:30 or I'm toast, even with an alarm clock and 6 cups of coffee. You don't see it happen. It's such a slow progression, a slow downgrade until you're in the depths of it. That's I think another problem is it's people don't know when they're going there. Now, for me, I've learned over the years to consciously understand where I am, but it takes a tremendous amount of effort, and a lot of times I miss it. And had a argument with the wife earlier last week that I was very frustrated with her about X, Y, and Z. And then in talking it over with her, I realized that I'm not frustrated with her at all. I'm feeling like crap.
It just manifested itself in an argument.
Yeah, exactly. I am, blaming her for working and me having to deal with the kids and all this other stuff. And that really wasn't the problem. I really have no problem watching I love watching the kids after school and getting to spend time with them growing up. And, I love the fact that she's, off and independently working and things like that. And it's, but it manifests itself in such a way that I didn't realize that I was getting to that point. I guess is my point there.
Yeah. And one thing go ahead, Gritch.
I was just going to say, I mean, when you're in the mix, it's very hard to do this, but there's still a phrase I love coming back to, which is think space, reflective space, however you want to characterize it. The principle is the same, which is you just get a moment to reflect on some things and maybe do a little internal search. And it requires some honesty, right? Because pride is a factor, anger is a factor. Like, these things are present, and you kind of have to nug your way through them a little bit to go, like, I was mad at the time, but was I wrong? Which nobody really likes and enjoys admitting.
Were men wrong? What's that?
Right. And so I think, there's that. And then what I was going to ask you, Doc, is, like, for you, where did that moment come where you were like, for the first time, I'm going to go seek mental health, like counseling, psychiatry, whatever it was that finally was like, I'm just going to do this. Like, I got to start somewhere. And then maybe if there's some lessons learned along the way as you picked up on, I mean, I simplistically equate it to like a barber or a tattoo artist of like, I came in with this idea. Did you understand what I wanted from this? And if I'm wrong, did they understand how to guide me to the right place so that we achieved an understanding of what we needed to do?
So, honestly, I started to become more aware of my mental health during the beginning of my third episode, but it was due to challenges that Doc Jr., who's now 22 and in college, was having with his behavior and emotional growth. Seeing him struggle and going to doctors for him, I started to really realize that I was having struggles, because with mental illness, you don't, like I said, you don't, we jokingly say you don't know you're crazy, but
and there is a genetic component to some of this,
right? So it was seeing that I started to look back in life and see certain episodes of things that had happened inside my marriage,
certain patterns arising.
Like in college, I was dating a girl, was really happy, and then just one day woke up and decided that I couldn't handle dating her anymore.
We've all been there.
I didn't know. I just thought
so like self-sabotage.
Yeah, self-sabotage, smoking, heavy drinking, things like that. That at the time, especially when you're younger, a lot of that when you're older, you look, oh, that was just I was just a dumb kid.
It's college experience.
Yeah, college experience, drinking, whiskey, weed, and women, right? And
oh wait, for us that was high school. My bad. Sorry. Go ahead.
High school people. But again, to kind of answer your question, Grinch, it went back to starting to have. I was starting to have some issues. Then again, I was starting on another cycle, and then I was watching my oldest son struggle, and so I started to kind of put two and two together. And that's when I started seeking treatment. And I found a real good doctor straight up. I was really lucky. But then changed insurance, and he wasn't covered by that insurance anymore. So I went to a different doctor. And this guy, I would try to communicate with him very clearly, because and again, that's just the way I am. I'm an engineer.
Yeah. You've already worked through the answers in your mind. Like,
yeah.
I'm telling you everything we've already accomplished. Let's just go. And this guy's probably like, I want to start over and learn this for myself.
He hated that. He thought I was lying to him. And so after a few months of him, I stopped treatment, but realized I wasn't ready to stop treatment yet. And then thankfully insurance switched back, and I was able to go back to that doctor again. But I mean, that brings up a whole other wonderful topic of the insurance and medical.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we've been down.
We have a
road.
Podcast.
Yes, we do.
Yeah, I've actually. I'm with a private psychiatrist now. I don't go through insurance for it. It's expensive, but it's worthwhile. As a matter of fact, it's funny. She went to high school with us, so she was a year behind us in high school.
I remember you mentioning that. Yeah.
Small world,
right?
But
go ahead, Doc. Sorry.
No.
I was going to say the other thing that we lack that. We lack that framework, that language to really discuss mental health issues. But it also goes on to, and this is not a diss on the science or medical community, but I think we're seeing it a little bit with COVID times now too. It's not exact science. You're not dealing, like when I deal with a data set at work, I'm dealing with a finite data set. When you're dealing with a medical data set, you're dealing with, what is it, 8.3 billion iterations. There's like 8.3 billion people alive or something like that right now. And, so the science is not as clear. So when it comes to looking at treatment for mental health, it's not just, we know that there's 3 basic neurotransmitters. We have a general idea of how they metabolize and are used up in the brain, but everybody's still different. And I've got a hereditary liver thing that keeps me from using a lot of medications. And again, we didn't find this out until about 5 years ago when they started regularly doing DNA testing. So we just don't know what we don't know yet. Why didn't this medication work? I don't know. Well, then we find out, a few years ago that, I can't actually metabolize this medication, so it's worthless in my body.
Right.
But
in the meantime, you got to keep being a father. You got to keep being a husband. Got to keep working.
And all this has to happen in real time.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, and that was kind of the point I was going to bring up is once you determine that you have the, I don't want to say issues, but, you have mental health problems, it becomes a lifelong journey, right? It's not, and maybe that's some of why as men, we struggle with it, right? As a man, okay, the car's broke. I do this. It's fixed. It's done. It works. With mental health, I think it becomes a lifelong journey because, as you mentioned, your body changes as you get older, right? Certain things change the way they metabolize. So you have to start changing your medications. And sometimes that's probably trial and error to some extent. Let's try this medication. And God forbid, this gives you some side effect. Now we've got to throw another medication at it to fix the side effect or find one that works.
And it's not to say that medication isn't helpful or an answer on.
Oh, no, not at all. Yeah.
But the other problem is body chemistry shifts. Once you've been on a medication long enough, your body chemistry shifts.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, and it's like with anything, you build up a tolerance.
It's like trying to constantly hit a moving target, right? Mm-hmm. And the target's also changing sizes, changing dimensions, space and time.
Right. Ball sacks hanging a little lower. I mean, it's always changing.
A lot lower.
As Doc mentioned, the other problem though is, you find that, that therapist that you can really communicate with and you have that rapport with, and then, your company changes insurance and now you've got to find a different therapist
and start completely over.
And every therapist, at least from what we've seen, Doc, you can tell me if this has been your experience as well. It seems like almost every therapist wants to wipe away everything that you've done and start from scratch because they know best.
Right.
And they want to do it their way. And so you're back at ground zero. It seems like.
Yeah,
sometimes.
there's definitely a little bit of, and maybe I'm calling it out a little too harshly, but there's a little bit of ego.
There's a lot of
amongst
ego.
Doctors.
I'll say it.
But at the same time, I respect that because as an engineer, there is nothing I hate more than going into a situation where I don't know. And so almost always I walk into a situation and I'm like, okay, let's start at the beginning. Okay, let's go back to point A and let's walk through this so I have an understanding of it before I start making decisions.
But it's not costing you $165 an hour. It's like, that's the difference.
No, but Doc's charging more than that.
Well, no, I'm just saying. Like, you go to a therapist and it's like, this is $160 an hour. And it's like, you got to start completely over. Not to make light of it, but some people are not financially in a situation where it's like, I can throw that kind of money at the problem.
That hurts.
Yeah. Doc's in a fortunate position where,
like when you talk about going private, it's like some people can't go private, but that doesn't mean they should not seek help.
Right.
You just got to.
I think
what works for them.
And this is, feel free to delete this if it's an overshare, but my psychiatrist is $385 a session, and that's usually every 4 to 6 weeks.
And do you get enough benefit from it for yourself that makes it worth it? Clearly, you do.
I do.
I was going to say he goes back, so I'm assuming he does, right? So
right.
But I mean, asking, thankfully, I make decent money at what I do, so we're blessed and able to do that. I mean, somebody that's
the guy working at the local grocery store
be able to,
can't handle that.
That's half the grocery bill for a family of 4 for a week, right there. That's just not not sustainable for a lot of folks, and that's I think that opens up the like I said, that other kind of path is that our not only do we lack a language, not only do we really not have a good understanding, we just don't have a good medical foundation for long-term care.
Yeah, our mental health infrastructure was destroyed in the 80s.
Yeah,
under the Reagan administration,
and
no one's really bothered to build it back up in a way that properly allows for everybody to have the same equal evaluation and care on a same level playing field. And it's sad.
Yeah, I went to one doctor and all he wanted to do was hand out piss tests every time I showed up. And I was like, dude, I don't have any problems with addiction. I have depression. very different things. Some people have addiction and depression, but as my doctor, I would figure out that, after working with him for, several months to a year, that he would realize what my challenges were. But, not all doctors are good. Not everybody has access to the care. And like you said, the mental health infrastructure is as abysmal as it was going into the 80s. Has just never, it wasn't replaced with anything better. You just went from being, okay, if you're even slightly off kilter, you're getting locked up and put in the happy house, to you're on your own, asshole.
Yeah. And to take this back further to where we started is, I don't know, most men aren't evolved enough maybe to say, yeah, I'm willing to pay somebody hundreds of dollars, an hour to tinker with my inner working thoughts and feelings. Most guys are going to be like, all right, I'll just shove that down and just power through it and keep going.
I can go buy an Xbox or a PlayStation and spend a couple hours doing that,
which
unfortunately exasperates the problem.
Exacerbates.
Yeah,
and I think
masturbates the problem.
Masturbates the problem.
I think when you look at, Mac brought up a great point there. You look at how many guys specifically, and we'll ignore the social media critters for a bit, because some of those folks make decent money off of it. But you always hear about almost like a lost generation in video games. These are guys that eschew family, work, food, self-care, just to sit and play a video game all day, every day.
What's wrong with that?
Yeah, see, I just want to point out though,
I'm lost.
while I couldn't
trying to figure out how to
articulate it, Doc thought I had a good idea at least. So screw the rest of you three.
He is the doc.
It's not unlike alcohol or other things. It's escapism, right?
It's escapism.
It's avoidance. It becomes a world that maybe is manageable. That has, because it is data, it's zeros and ones. It's got some more defined criteria as opposed to the real world, which is emotion based. It's frustrating. And we didn't touch on this yet, but when you're in the trenches with significant others, they're in there with you and they're trying to figure it out. They're trying to figure out like when to give you space, when to be close, when to ask leading questions, when to leave you be. They're right as much as they're wrong because they're just going off instinct. And there are times like they might ask something and in the moment you're too angry to want to answer it honestly. But then like in the car later, you're like, the more I kind of thought about that, I was kind of a dick.
But we do live in an egocentric society. And while you're in the trenches with that person, we tend to think nobody's got it as bad as we do.
Yeah. And it comes down to, this is a bit of like more relationship advice in the sense that like, we're not always great about it. We're not perfect, but like Mrs. Grinch and I try to say, like, if you're going to have an argument, you have it based on love, right? It's at the end of the day, there's love there and you're working through it, but you still get angry.
Did she? Just out of curiosity,
we're still human beings.
Did she write?
Like you don't like losing arguments, right?
Did she write that script for you?
Yeah.
No,
we're in the trenches together.
Paid endorsement by Mrs. Grinch.
Hey,
it's on a coaster underneath the drink she
right.
made.
Well, it's another element of this, which is men also don't talk about intimacy. They don't always want to admit when there are things wrong with the personal relationship, either sexually or otherwise. Because it's an admission of a weakness,
right?
And we don't like doing that,
right? As
opposed to saying, "I'm going to be a little vulnerable here because maybe somebody will have some thoughts that I just didn't think of." And it's not the full like it takes a village, but it's close to that. Like sometimes, we've all I think experienced situations where a person who is not in the mix, it kind of has that third party objectivity. Sometimes can say things like, dude, you were a dick. And you're like, what? Fuck.
You're right. I was.
But again, it's what I know we've not talked in depth about it, but it is a conversation. It's like when I got my divorce, like looking at the three of you, looking back at my situation, you may have had an opinion about it. never voiced that opinion. And the overwhelming majority response was, it's not our place. You think you're in love, and you think you're in a healthy situation, mainly because you're too close to it to realize you're not. And I get that. And I never expressly came out and said, hey, what do you guys think? But I think if I had, I'm not saying tell me, but I think if I had, you guys probably would have been honest and said, you really want the truth? And I'd be like, yes. And you'd be like, okay. You ain't gonna like it.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, it's like the old adage of the road to hell's paved with good intentions,
right?
Because it's like, it's a respect thing. It's like, hey, at the end of the day, it's your choice. Like, who am I to tell you otherwise? As opposed to, this might be a fucking train wreck.
Right.
My wife and I call it space and grace. You have to give people space and grace.
Right. Because in fairness, we don't know it all either.
Right.
We get a perspective through a window that we see. And so I think that hesitancy to comment actually comes from a good place of like admitting you just don't know it all. There's shit you don't know about a relationship or a situation. And we've all been in situations where we're like, I don't need a fucking opinion on everything I do.
Right.
Like,
yeah. Well, and you brought it up before, right? I mean, it's the Facebook persona, right?
That's right. All smiles.
We're seeing only what you want us to see, but most of the time, thankfully, I think, we've all gotten to the point now where, we see the good and the bad.
Here's us arguing at the airport.
Right.
You've seen me without my shoes in TSA. You accept me for who I am.
Yeah. We need to talk about that, by the way.
Obviously this can be a powerful topic. And like I said, we did this in season 1 when we talked about depression as a whole. And Grinch, like you mentioned, like we had an individual that was a friend of ours from high school that took their own life. And that kind of was the antithesis for that specific topic. And now we wanted to drill down in terms of kind of the male psychology and the issues surrounded with male masculinity and our ability or inability to be able to deal with that on any level. And I think one of the things that is beneficial, again, for us, as we have said throughout the course of all of our podcasts and this one specifically, is we are comfortable enough at this point where we can talk openly. A lot of times we joke, and for our listeners, obviously all you masturbators at home, when we talk about on the show as debating a topic, we will joke and we will make light. We will not make fun of Doc, right? We may try to
lighten the mood,
right?
Or
sprinkle in humor.
And we've said before, we use dark humor
right
as a coping mechanism.
But at the end of the day, if Doc's going to sit there and open up and say, look, I go through cyclical depression, I understand what I'm not going to lie. I don't understand what that is like, but I can empathize with the fact that exists and that you have to deal with that. And that's got to be tough. And so obviously, if anybody's listening, one of the things that we want you to take away from this is find help. If you can't talk to family or friends, seek help. Obviously, making sure that help is beneficial to you and whatever the course of treatment that you need is. And if you have to pivot from doctor to doctor, as much as that sucks, then you do it, because obviously you need to find somebody that works with you and it's beneficial. Doing it alone is never going to be the answer. And I think I expressly across the board, I think all of us would agree with that.
Yeah. Know thyself. Right.
Know thyself, know your limits, know where you need professional guidance.
Right. And if it means your family member has to sit you down and go, dude, you're off. Something's not right. If it's your wife, if it's a brother or sister, mother, parent, and they're like, something about you not right, then you should listen to that. Like with Haas, when his wife's telling him something about you's fucked up and you need to figure it out. Like, it's easy as a man to go, whatever, fuck off, and go about your day. But if somebody's telling you that, if it's an outside person telling you that, you need to listen. So, obviously, in terms of being respectful of time, Doc, thank you for being here. Thank you for being willing to open up and talk about this. Obviously, you have, been dealing with issues your entire life, and you are at least at a point now in your life where when something occurs, when you feel a certain way, whatever it is, you recognize it. And that's not always the case for people. So thank you for coming on here and being willing to open up about that.
Thank you. Thanks for having
absolutely.
me.
Yeah, thank you very much. It was
really
great talking to
appreciate
you
it.
again.
Oh, it's great seeing you.
Yeah. Even though it's been 2 years.
Way too long.
Not in person, but and as always, for all of our masturbators out there, like I said, go seek help. If you're having an issue, go seek help. If you can't, go through a friend or family, go to an outside source, but be willing to talk to somebody You do not need to do it alone. So with that being said, if anybody would like to check out our podcast, go to aspiriteddebate.com. You can check out our vault. All of our episodes are there. We are pushing 100 episodes between this and our sister podcast, Liquor and Leagues. Feel free to go out and check any of them out. Obviously, you can drop us a line there, or you can go to spiriteddebates@gmail.com and drop us a line. Drink recipe you'd like us to try. Any comment, feedback, we'd love to hear. If you have a topic you'd like us to talk about, we can do our best to get you on the show, much like the doc and any of our previous guests we've had on. So please feel free to do that. And with that being said, gentlemen, I love you guys. I hope everything goes well with you as we approach Christmas time. Obviously, it can be tough during the holidays. Obviously, I know depression ramps up during that time. So I hope everything goes well for you. And I look forward to doing this again next week. The views, information, or opinions expressed during the A Spirited Debate podcast series or any affiliated podcasts are solely those of the hosts or guests involved and do not represent those of people, institutions, or organizations that the host or guests may or may not be associated with in a professional or personal capacity, unless explicitly stated. While guests are invited to listen, listeners acknowledge that they are not being provided professional advice from the podcast or its guests. The content within the parameters of A Spirited Debate podcast series or any affiliated podcast are for entertainment and educational purposes only. Any views or opinions are not intended to malign any religion, ethnic group, club, organization, company, or individual.